welcome to my channel. Welcome to today's video. Today's video is going to be my monthly installment of Would I Repurchase? So that is a series I do here on my channel where I randomize 10 palettes in my collection and then talk about whether I would or would not repurchase them. It's pretty straightforward. It's as easy as that. So if that sounds good to you, if you like palette videos, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't yet. I would love it if you stuck around. But with all that, let's just get started. All right, so there's a lot of different ways that people do this video. The way that I personally like to do it is I like to pretend that these palettes I already own, they're in my collection, I love them, and then overnight they disappeared. I always give the example, my sister came over, she took it, she's just playing ignorant and pretending she didn't take it from my collection. I would not repurchase it. And just so you know, she'd never do that because she's Gen Z. She doesn't wear eyeshadow. But just in case. So would I not repurchase these palettes already knowing them? And that's also with the caveat that these palettes aren't discontinued. They're still available for purchase. Some people do it where they never own the palette. And if it came out today, would it still be interesting to them? I will, of course, link some other creators down below that I've seen do this video. But that's how I like to do it. So I'm going to pull up my Tiny Decisions app. And I'm going to insert in just my screen recording of this. I find that to just be a little bit easier as far as how I'm going to show it. I still have my wheel pulled up from the last time I did it because it does block out the ones that I've already talked about. I've made sure my wheel is updated because I've had some trouble in the past. We should be good to go. So let's just pull the first palette. I'm going to pull 10. See which ones we're going to talk about. So the first one I have is the Pat McGrath Bronze Ecstasy. There's a lot of Pat McGrath we haven't talked about yet. Colourpop Head Capricorn in Charge. Gloss God Smoke and Mirrors, that's 3. Pat McGrath Sunset Romance. I knew there was going to be like a heavy Pat McGrath video. I'm just waiting for it. Bobbi Brown Day and Light. Okay, that's 5. Anastasia Soft Glam. Odens Eye Merry Christmas. Natasha Denona Coral. I need 2 more. Sydney Grace Tiny Marvels. And then the last one is going to be the Sigma New Mod. All right, so let me go pull those palettes and we'll get started. I have my palettes. We're going to talk about them in order that they were pulled. And of course, any videos that I've done, dedicated videos on, they will be linked either above or down below, probably both. So let's start with the first one. It is one of the Pat McGrath Quints. This is Bronze Ecstasy. It came out, was it last holiday or the holiday before? I don't remember. I just remember that this is the last Pat McGrath palette launch that I was pretty excited for. There's another one coming up here. So this is what Bronzed Ecstasy looks like. 3 shimmers, 2 mattes. Most of them were all shimmers. This is the one I think that had the most mattes in it. And this is one of my favorite ones of that collection. I really enjoyed this palette. It is really nice. I think this is one of Pat McGrath's better launches, better palettes. I think these nice little small curated collections are really cute. Do I reach for this as much as I should? No, but this is like a really nice glam look. And I think my favorite of these Quint styles. I think so, which is saying something because most of them are like pinkies. And this one's like definitely more bronze, but I think this one's my favorite. I would repurchase this one. I like it a lot. Unfortunately, Pat McGrath has gone like a little downhill, but I still really like this one and it reminds me of why I loved Pat McGrath at one time. The next one's my only Colourpop, surprisingly, and it's my little quad. This is the Head Capricorn in Charge. I am a Capricorn, if you didn't know, and when I say I'm a Capricorn, like, I am a Capricorn to a T. Every single trait that a Capricorn has, it is me. I am Capricorn. So this is what this little palette looks like. You know, is it special? No. Is it cute? Yes. Does it do everything you want it to do in a little palette? Yes. If I'm looking at it outside of the name, would I repurchase this? No, but because it's a Capricorn palette, I absolutely love it. It's simple, it's easy, like I can travel with it. I will say, like, I only have 2 of these little quads in this like plastic, and my other one's broken. It broke the very first time I opened it, which I think is why Colourpop kind of doesn't make these anymore. They're pretty flimsy packaging. So I'm really hoping this doesn't break. I can't say I use it that often, but I love having it in my collection. And if they came out with this, being honest, I probably would still repurchase this. Yeah, if this disappeared and they still had it, I probably would. I think so. It's just easy and simple. If it was more colorful, I might just skip on it, but knowing I'll always be able to use these shades no matter what, I'm happy to have it. Now, the next palette I have is the Gloss God Smoke and Mirrors. This was actually the palette that got me to try Gloss Gods. I had heard of Gloss Gods. I was kind of hemming and hawing over what palette to get, and then they launched this for a limited edition holiday 2 years ago maybe, and I purchased this one along with the Vintage Glam and the new neutrals, and I did a video with all 3 of them. Here's what this one looks like. I love Gloss Gods. I actually have an affiliate code with Gloss Gods. I'll link it up on the screen and down below. It'll save you some money if you order off them. They are a Swedish indie brand, and they just have really impactful shimmers. Their shimmers are so pretty, and they're the kind of shimmers that don't have a lot of flaky textured fallout. They're really smooth but impactful. It's my favorite kind. I really dislike like those really flaky shimmers. As beautiful as those are, they're just such a pain, and I can't be bothered. I love this palette because it has like these more rosy tones in here. It's not just a grayscale, black, like gray cool tone palette that we see a lot when companies try to do cool tones. It has like that coolness in color, like even with these browns here. So I very much love this palette. I definitely would repurchase it. I love all my Gloss Gods palettes. There's some maybe I use less than others, but this is definitely one I would want to repurchase. So we're doing good so far. Last episode, it was about half and half, I think. The wheel chooses what the wheel wants, and sometimes we have good picks and sometimes we have not great picks. My next little Pat McGrath quint that came in that same collection as the Bronzed Ecstasy is Sunset Romance. And here's what this one looks like. Also 3 shimmers, 2 mattes. I feel like I remember these having more shimmers, maybe not. But, you know, I can do without this one. While the formula is really, really nice, you look at this and you're like, oh, this is Pat McGrath's Color Story. So I have this probably 7 times over. And at this point, I'm like exhausted of it. This is one of the better ones as far as this Color Story. But if I had all the other ones and just this one disappeared, I don't think I would repurchase it. Again, like, love the formula, love like the size and the curation. I like this style more than the Motherships, even though the Motherships have the special shades, and that's why I keep buying them. But I wish that more of her palettes came like this rather than those like mega palettes. I don't like those as much. So this one's a no, but only due to like my personal collection and what I have. Now this palette is one of my favorite palettes. It is the most boring palette probably you'll ever see. It's the Bobbi Brown Day and Light palette. This came out for holiday also, and here's what it looks like. Like I said, most boring palette. Here's what I've discovered about myself though, is that if I'm gonna get a neutral palette, I need it to have lighter tones in it for it to be wearable for me, for what I want to use a neutral palette for. I used to buy palettes that just had too many darker shades, and then I never utilized the entire palette. Just having one deep dark brown in here and then these lighter tones to kind of mix so I can do more of like a brown look, more of like a pinky rosy look. This is everything I need in just a day-to-day palette. Like if you only had one palette in like neutrals, like you weren't really wearing makeup for like fun creativity, you needed to wear makeup, it was like a necessity for a job or something like that, this would be the one great palette to have. It's really, really nice. The quality is fantastic. I actually, this is going way back on my channel, but the first Bobbi Brown palette I tried was the Jade Stone palette. I absolutely hated that palette, that formula, everything. I took a chance on this palette because there's something speaking to me about it, and I'm so glad that I did. It is beautiful, 100%. Like, I have to have this in my collection. It's one of the staple neutral palettes that I go back to over and over again. The next one might surprise you. We're halfway done. So the 6th palette here is the Anastasia Soft Glam. I could do without this palette. I keep wanting to love this palette. I pull it in and shop my stash. I just don't love it like I think everyone else does. The problem is ABH came out with the Modern Renaissance and then they just stuck with the warm tones for a long time. And this is during that era. As much as I hate to repeat myself, like I don't love these types of warm tones. It's just a little bit too warm for my taste. I want to love it. I want it to be like my all-encompassing basic palette, but the Bobbi Brown for me is so much better. I bought this at a time where like ABH was like the brand to have. They were regarded as like a really the it brand. And I just didn't get the hype like everyone else. I kept buying the palettes, you know. I still have the Sultry and the Jackie Aina that are unopened. I haven't tried them. And it's not that I don't want to because I've heard great things about those palettes. It's just that I've been disappointed by most of the ABH palettes that I've purchased, that I'm kind of scared to open it and then realize I wasted my money. But I mean, joke's on me because I'm wasting my money on having it sit there unopened anyways. I can't explain to you how my mind works, but that's how it is right now. As of right now, it's sitting there not disappointing me. And this palette does. It's not that it's a bad formula. It's just personal preference. I don't love these tones on me. I don't know. Like these orangey tones here are just too warm. Is it a good palette? Like, is it a good color story for someone who likes these tones? Like, yes, the formula is nice. I will agree with that. But I just never have been able to get on the ABH hype train. And if this went missing, I would not miss it. This is a palette I'd give to my sister because like I said, she doesn't wear a lot of eyeshadow. This might be a palette she gets good use out of. The next one that I have is the Odens Eye Merry Christmas palette. We've had a few Odens Eye palettes being talked about so far. And we've had hits and we've had misses. This isn't a bad palette, but I wouldn't repurchase it. It's just like ABH, Odens Eye kind of was really, really hyped up for a while, and I got into the habit of just buying every single launch from them when I should have been more selective. This is not a color story I'm really going to reach for. Now, there are color stories from Odens Eye that I love. Like, I love the Sea Talk palette. I love the Flora Story palette. I love the Christmas Eve palette. This one, like, is just not me. It's not me. And I will keep it because you can no longer get it, but I would not repurchase it. It's not my favorite. I even like the Snow Dream palette over this palette. So this is a no. I'm happy to have it, but in the future for Odens Eye, like I'm just going to be a lot more selective in the palettes that I get and be a little bit more realistic with myself because Odens Eye can lean colorful and sometimes it's just a little too colorful for me. The 8th palette is the Natasha Denona Coral palette. I lusted after this palette when it came out. I wanted it so bad, and then I bought it, and it sat in my drawer of shame for so long. It actually just came out of my drawer of shame. I pulled it into a Shop My Stash for July, like mid-July, end of July, early August, and finally got some use out of this palette. So I actually liked it a lot more than I thought. I came up with some really pretty looks with it. It's a little deceiving in the pan of what you can do. It's really pretty on the eyes, but as far as my collection goes, like, this is my 8th video doing this, which means that I've had 80 palettes that I've talked about so far, and I'm only halfway through this series. Like, I still have 80 palettes to talk about. So as far as my collection goes, I don't think that this is a necessary palette. Again, like, I'd recommend this palette. I think it's nice Natasha Denona quality, but being cutthroat with myself, like, I don't need this palette. It doesn't have like a good purpose or serve a lot in my collection. Pulling it out after not using it for years and years, like, just shows that it's not a palette that's like a dependable one. It doesn't like spark joy in me anymore like it did when it first came out. So this is not one that I'd repurchase if it disappeared. These next two, though, I'll spoil both of them. I love them. Two of my favorite palettes in my collection. These Sydney Grace Tiny Marbles. I have ranted and raved about this palette because this was one, you'll hear a theme, I had unopened in my collection for so long. This palette felt like a palette. It's a collaboration with Mel Thompson, who we all know like has passed. So I had it unopened when she passed, and I kind of felt like I couldn't open it for some reason. I really enjoyed Mel Thompson as a creator. So it felt like too sacred to use almost. And I finally had to like get over that. Like, I don't know Mel Thompson personally. I didn't know her personally, but I'm telling myself that she probably would slap me in the face for not using the makeup that she created. My parasocial relationship with her tells me that. So I ended up cracking into this palette, and I'm so happy that I did. It's one that looks scary. For a neutral lover for myself, this is a lot of color, so it looks really scary, but I loved every look I came up with this. I reached for this so much. It has just the best grounding mattes, neutral mattes to go with all the shimmers. You have just like one pop of green, like the green's in the center, so I think that's throwing me off. Like, this kind of really bright goldy yellow is here, so that's kind of like making this palette look more colorful than it is, but it really is not as colorful as you think if you just do the right looks. I think it's a very versatile palette. I'm so happy to have this. The quality is so fantastic. People still rave and rave about this palette, and for good reason. I would 100% repurchase this. I love having this in my collection, and I'm so glad that I forced myself to use it. Then the last palette that I have is the Sigma New Mod. This was actually in Shop My Stash the same time that I pulled in this Natasha palette. This is one of my favorite palettes. I already said that. I spoiled it, but I really enjoy Sigma's formula. It took me a while to try Sigma because for the longest time, I kind of just assumed that they were an influencer brand that people were talking about because they were affiliated with Sigma. But I have to say, like, Sigma has really good quality eyeshadows. I'm glad that I waited because I now am more selective picking palettes. I only own two, this one and the Ambiance palette, which I've already talked about. And I love both of them. I love the color stories. I'll continue to only buy color stories that intrigue me or look like that I like, because the formula for both palettes is top notch. They're just easy to work with. I can use it, not have to think about it. It's just blend, 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 and done. So this is a palette I 100% would repurchase. And those are all 10. So let me count this up. I have wait, this is wrong. This palette I said I would repurchase. Did I do this right? I messed up a little. Okay, we're good. I got my piles mixed up. I don't know what I was doing. But I have 4 palettes that I would not repurchase. So the Odens Eye Merry Christmas, the ABH Soft Glam, the Pat McGrath Sunset Romance, and the Natasha Denona Coral. That means 6 of these I would. So at least the majority of these I like. So let's go over them. Bobbi Brown Day and Light, the Gloss God Smoke and Mirrors, Capricorn Head in Charge, or Colourpop Head Capricorn in Charge. Then the Pat McGrath Bronze Ecstasy, Sigma New Mod, and the Sydney Grace Tiny Marbles. So luckily we have the majority that I like. I like them all, quite honestly. It's just whether I would repurchase them or not. I think that's a completely different question. I am thinking about, after I'm done with this series, which is going to be many, many months from now, going through all my videos and taking all the palettes that I said I wouldn't repurchase and then putting them on the chopping block and seeing if there's any I should declutter out of those. That's kind of what I'm thinking the next part of this series would be. I think it would be a really cool follow-up because eventually I'll run out of palettes and this series will end. So let me know your thoughts down below. If you like that idea, one, if you have any of these palettes and you agree with my opinion, whether that's repurchase them or not repurchase them, I'd love to hear all your thoughts down below. But this is where I'm going to leave you all. I hope you're having a great one, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, everyone.